Hi, class. This is the lecture that will accompany your reading for Chapter 7, which is on positive psychology and working with strengths for our counseling theories and methods class. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we'll be talking about, I'll just briefly go into some historical context of um, counseling and also positive psychology. We'll talk next about positive psychology in general. And then in the next video, we'll talk about applications to counseling. Again, I'm going to split up this lecture into two parts. So why have a lecture, a reading on positive psychology? So in order to understand why we need this lecture, why we need positive psychology, we really need to understand that in the past, most models of mental health have been this quote unquote deficit and distress model. So deficit means that there's something missing, there's something wrong, something off, with mental illness. And distress means, it's focused on the things that are going wrong. So things that are people who are having problems and so on. And this has been the most prominent model of psychology. And this is sometimes referred to as the medical model. So the medical model says, okay, you go to the doctor when you're sick, and then they give you some treatments to feel better. And this medical model has been applied to mental health as well. So you go to the therapist when you're sick, when you're, depressed, anxious, when you're having some sort of issue. And the goal is that in working with counselor or therapist that your symptoms will be reduced. You have less depression, less anxiety, etc. So this has been the prominent model of mental health in the past. The strengths or resiliency models take this take a different approach. The strengths and resiliency models are rooted in counseling psychology, and your book particularly mentions how it's rooted in career counseling. But the strengths and resiliency model is also emphasized in social work, etc. And they're focusing more on thriving, not just surviving. So in contrast to the medical model, where you only seek out help if you're experiencing some sort of distress or depression, etc., with the strengths and resiliency model, it's looking at not just how to make people who are having issues back to a functioning level. It's going to look at what makes functioning people do even better. What will make people thrive in their environments? What will make people exceed in their environments? So this change in focus is that we're not just going to be focused on people who are having problems or issues, but also how do we optimize functioning? How do we thrive in our environment, go from just okay to great? So this is sort of where positive psychology fits in, is that it's going to do both. Obviously, we're going to need to help people who are in distress, who might be struggling. And this is where the strengths model play in, that will look towards their strengths, because even if someone's struggling or depressed or anxious, they're going to have strengths in their lives that they can turn to. And positive psychology really is going to shift our focus, so we're not just focusing on what is going wrong, but what does this person bring to counseling? What are their strengths? What are their resources? What are their families? What other sort of things do they bring that can help them overcome this dilemma? So this leads us to a discussion of positive psychology. And positive psychology is a study of strengths that enable individuals and communities to thrive. And it has its roots in humanistic psychology. So we've already studied humanism with Maslow and Rogers. Um, but really, this is going to be looking at, yeah, what are the strengths people need? What are some character virtues? What are some character strengths that people bring to the table? And the idea here is that positive psychology aims to look at how humans can thrive, again, not just survive. So, this idea of optimal human functioning. And there are a variety of theorists who have contributed to positive psychology. None of these are particularly related to counseling, but these are theorists who have developed a variety of positive psychology um, concepts. And I'll briefly talk about a couple of them. We've already talked about Abraham Maslow and the idea of self actualization, Martin Seligman, um, and Mihaly, and then this is a hard word, but Csikszentmihalyi. Um, yes, so Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi is another positive psychologist who have developed theories and looked at particular elements of positive psychology um, and done research on positive psychology. So, this field attempts to help people incorporate these character strengths and virtues in their lives. This might be things like optimism. How do you cultivate optimism in people? Hope. How do we develop hope? Joy, curiosity, love, gratitude. So, they're focused on different things. So, they'll look at how to increase positive subjective experiences in people's lives. So, how do we get more positive emotions? Like, again, curiosity, love, gratitude. So they do studies on how to increase these positive emotions in people's lives, these positive subjective experiences. They'll look at how to develop individual traits, so character strengths and virtues. Um, and they'll look at how to develop positive context. So, how do we make institutions and communities thrive? What is needed to build these communities and um, really make them the best that they can be? So, just as an example of research in positive psychology, we're going to look at Csikszentmihalyi's research. And this researcher developed this idea of flow. Flow is this state of being where you're completely immersed in what you're doing. So I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but if you've been doing something that you're totally immersed in doing it, and suddenly you don't even realize it, but a few hours have passed, you're like, whoa, where did the time go? I remember doing this, having this experience when I was um, practicing piano sometimes. Like, I would get really into what I was doing, learning the particular um, notes and, particular songs, and suddenly an hour or two had passed. And I had experienced a state of flow where I was so engaged in what I was doing that just time stopped, and I was so, yeah, so into it, enjoying it. And so this concept of flow has been researched, and again, this is when you're engaged in rewarding activity, you are able to screen out any unpleasant distractions, and you feel a sense of control over our lives. Um, so this is just one idea that comes up in positive psych, um, and this in counseling, this might come up where you ask people, about their flow experiences and how to increase those in their life. So, how to increase these times in their life where they're feeling so engaged in something, whether it's running or um, painting or chatting with friends, that just time sort of stops and it's really a rewarding experience. I'm going to post this link for a talk by Martin Seligman, who is one of the founders of positive psychology. And I would encourage you to listen to um, Martin talk about how to increase positive emotions in your lives. So, what are ways that psychologists have found to really help people thrive, help people have more positive emotions. And in the midst of all that's going on right now in the world, again, I just encourage you to listen to this talk. And again, this might be something included on the exam. We're going to stop here and transition to the next part of the lecture, which is on applying positive psychology to counseling.